Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this radio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about a spate of adverts, this is online and elsewhere, that I've seen in Australia that is promoting what I would call, in my view, Indian, as in the subcontinent, Indian nationalism. Now, I guess there's a few things. There's been a run of adverts for masters and PhDs in the universities, and those adverts have very prominently featured Indians and white people. There's some Asian people, as in Chinese, in sort of the mid-ground, and a small number of white people, white males, in background. So it's very much pitched at Indian students. And these aren't the rural peasants. These are the Brahmins they're pitching at, or the wealthy. And but there's some other adverts I've seen which are rather disturbing, in my view, rather disturbing. One is a special dating, or not a dating, a dating and marriage website, I suppose you'd call it. And this was just became before one of the videos that I was looking at, which was interestingly highlighting that dangers of mass migration, and a bit ironic to see this advert. So it's an advert. It got some Indian people in it, and they're males, and they're talking about dating Indian girls, and that's their preference, and so on. Now, the website caters exclusively it's in Australia, but it caters exclusively for Indians who are in Australia, one assumes, as whether as students or as they've got work visas, or they're migrants, or recent citizens, or whatever, to hook up with other Indians. So it's for a place effectively for Indian men to meet Indian women. That's a second thing is if you want to get married, don't marry some local Indian girl that's been sullied by those Western values. Certainly, you wouldn't consider a white woman or any other than an Indian. So bring your bride out from India. If you don't know anyone, doesn't matter, we'll fix it for you. So the important thing is to make sure you marry another Indian. Now, this needs to be considered in the wider backdrop of the Indian very determined desire not to assimilate, not to integrate, and to stay genetically pure. This is a very big issue for them. And their integration rate is, less than 1%. Even after, 150, 160, 170 years in a different country and away from India, their integration rate is still less than 5%. So we're looking at a group as migrant. They come along and set up another country within your country when they're migrants. So, and they want special allowances, special handouts, special arrangements, special, entitled, handout from the host country they've moved to. Now, this is the same all over the world. So as immigrants, I believe Indians are a threat to any nation and any nation status and any society that they go into in significant numbers. They want to stay separate. They don't want the responsibility of running the state unless it's to look after and deliver goodies and handouts to their diaspora. But they're happy to take over and turn the local population into tax cattle for their rich Indian elite. Same as they have that structure of the Brahmins and the caste system in India. But these adverts are simply, in my view, a manifestation of the Indian determination to go to another country, but set up their own country within that country, and again remain genetically pure and so on. Now, I've had not this exact same conversation, but I've had this general over sort of general conversation with some people who who are here, and then someone always pipe up, well, I know an Indian that and sure, I guess over the the millions that have arrived in Australia, you can find, or the West generally, you can find some that have integrated, but again, it doesn't change the fact that it's significantly less than 1%, and that's over, say, a 25-year period, and still less than 5% over a 170-year period. So, when you look at any other group, the integration rate is generally quite a bit higher. Even the Chinese, that are, again, stick to their diaspora quite closely, they are the same. The integration rate it's there. Even in Hong Kong, where the British were running the place for over 100 years, the integration rate still wasn't significant. It was there. I mean, it happened, and so on. Where it tended to happen was if a local Chinese family, where their interests were being effectively under British government protection, and they realised that really they were only rich and well off because the British government was protecting their commercial interests, and they would send their children to go to be educated in a Western country, Britain or US, Australia, and so on, and then they would tend to marry into a white family, only a wealthy one, by the way, never a poor one. And so there was some of that, but again, that was quite a small thing. So coming back to integrate, I think the Indians in integration terms are the worst migrants you can possibly have. Now, the second aspect of this, which these adverts, in my view, particularly this dating agency, marriage agency thing, that to me is yet further sort of proof and evidence of the Indian determination to, as they see it, remain genetically, morally, and spiritually poor. Remember, they see the West as morally and spiritually, with some accuracy, by the way, given how things are at the moment. They see the West morally and spiritually as a failed society, or where you're watching in real time the society fall into a state of disrepair from which it is unlikely to ever recover. The last days of the Roman Empire type thing. That's a bit rich coming from an eternal basket case country like India, but the Brahmins don't see it that way. 50, 60 million, well, not even that many of rich Brahmins, wealthy Brahmins, well-to-do Brahmins in India. They see that the caste system is the natural order of things because it maintains them at the apex, and so therefore, what can be unnatural about that? And therefore, they see their place they see their destiny as being this moral, spiritual elite for the whole world, where everyone is morally and spiritually inferior to them. And because of their superiority in this area, that people should be giving them money and allowing them to hold all the well-paying, prestigious jobs and so on and so forth. But this idea of non-integration is absolutely integral to their way of thinking. Now, in addition to that, once they come to a Western country, they encourage as much as is ever possible. They can't really set up the big supermarket chains, but as much as ever possible, they encourage their diaspora to only buy to spend money. If you've got money to spend, only spend it with other Indians, Indian businesses, or Indian, workers or labourers. Only spend with other Indians rather than give that money to the white folks, the local white folks. I mean, we live in their country, but we've come here to take, not to give. And let's be very clear about that. So they only spend money in other businesses or for any goods in Indian shops. Even down to, Indians, will buy a car dealership in Australia, and other Indians will only buy cars from that dealership. And I mean, the list just goes on and on. I mean, there are things like national chains of supermarket chains, for example, and they'll buy things there, but there are legal requirements where maybe they don't have a member of the diaspora that's, say, an electrician, but it's legally required an electrician has to do so. They'll do that. So they'll accept that. They very much deal in cash, and so they're outside of the traceable transaction system, and they're very creative with tax management. They have huge scams for bringing peasant workers out to the West to work in the corner shops that they buy, and the food franchises take out food stores. That's sort of businesses that are only viable with peasant labour from the home country. They're also very big on borrowing, using offshore money to buy businesses in the West, and then using these invented management fees and all sorts of things like that to ensure that the local business doesn't pay any tax, and that the profit all goes offshore and so on. So that in my view, there's very little benefit in having in Indian immigrants. Some say, well, look, it's a counterbalance against the Chinese immigration. Otherwise, the West would become a Chinese colony through immigration and the vast numbers of Chinese that exist in the world. So in order to counterbalance that, we have to have Indian immigration. So that means, well, we're creating one problem that's not very good to have. And so let's just double down and create twice the amount of problems, none of which are very good to have. I mean, what an absurd attitude and point of view. So now, if anybody, it doesn't matter whether Indians or not. I don't care. I mean, I've done business all over the world with all sorts of different people. I don't care. But if any people, any group of people, want to come to the West and purposefully not integrate, and purposefully not assimilate, and willfully and purposefully seek special benefits for their diaspora while at the same time refusing to assimilate, then I don't think those people should come as immigrants. I think if they want to come as tourists or students or short-term guest workers, or that's fine. I don't care. No problem. If highly skilled people want to come to the West and bring their skills, it could be whether it be in the medical field or scientific or anything, engineering, they're welcome to come. But again, you have to agree to assimilate, integrate. Now, just to illustrate this, there's even at the non-integration here. Now, here's a medical specialist, one of the highest paid medical specialists in Australia, by the way, and he's an Indian guy, and his family left India to go to South Africa in the 1840s, I think it was. And so again, 170, 180 years outside of India. They then moved to somewhere else in the West, and I'll think of it. And maybe what was at the time Rhodesia, and then they came to Australia in the late 1940s. So they've been in the West or out of India for, say, close to 180 years, and I was sitting next to them at a function, and the guy speaks with an Australian accent. I'm a pleasant guy, but more his wife's got the chip on the shoulder, but even she's been given she's a doctor, an affirmative action doctor, I should add, but nonetheless a doctor. So they are living in there's only 1 in 1,000 people in Australia that are living the sort of lifestyle that they are in terms of wealth and the desirable postcode, children going to the best schools, that sort of thing. So all the fruits that the West has to offer, they're bathing and basking in every nickel of it and every aspect of it. The quiet tree-lined streets, the whole thing. So she's convinced, though, she's a victim of racism and white oppression and how is beyond me, and nor can she explain it incidentally. But they insist that they two Indians marrying each other again, 170 years, 180 years outside of India yet still, and that there's this determination. Absolutely rigid, unshakable determination to only marry other Indians and to send back wherever possible for brides and husbands from the village of their ancestors, not even from Greater India, but the village and area of their ancestors, for Christ's sakes. So this tribalism going. Here's a guy who's been westernized, or his generations are westernized over 180 years, has one of the best paid jobs in Australia, the whole of Australia. And yet still he thinks in this tribal fucking mentality. It's insane. I mean, how is it even possible? Now that they've got, 2 or 3 children, and so the woman's saying that she wants not Australian or anything, they're Indian. And she said so with great determination, and that she wants them to marry Indians from India, and they intend to arrange brides and husbands for the children, and they go to India every year to sort of make sure that the Indianness, if you will, stays strong. Now this again, these are people who you'd think will be fully westernized and integrated. All the benefits of the West is been given and handed out, and yet again they're absolutely cast in concrete, determined not to integrate. So this is something that Western governments are really going to have to address, because given the vast population of India and the huge surplus population of India, remember they've got hundreds upon hundreds of millions of surplus population. So they'll want to bring out, but the Brahmins that are here will want to bring out Indian coolies to the Indian peasants, so they can just fully recreate, which they're doing already, by the way, the social caste system that they have. So this is something that really needs to be considered. Now let's look at the other side of this. If there was an advert for, hey, white people, if you only want to date and marry other white people, here's the dating marriage website for you. Whites only allowed. If you're not white, you can't be part of it. And by the way, this is to make sure that the white race stays pure. Can you imagine the carry on? It would be screaming international headlines that the globalist controlled mainstream media will be going into hyperdrive, ventilating about Nazis, Hitler. You can imagine it. But all this stuff is passing unnoticed. Oh no, that's okay. Yeah, fine. Which is maybe why the Indians, particularly the Brahmin caste, are desperate to maintain this rage of colonial oppression and evil white people and evil things that bring Churchill is evil, Churchill is Hitler, and all this sort of stuff in order to sort of maintain the victimhood and the victimhood bandwagon. And so they can always position themselves when they do the most outrageous racist things. But we're victims. You can't call us racist. You've been with Tassus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.